So imagine sitting across a table from someone, like someone you deeply care about, and just knowing with absolute certainty the exact date and circumstances of how they're going to die.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's heavy right off the bat.
Right. And worse, knowing you can't do a single thing to stop it. I mean, we constantly chase this idea of seeing into the future, treating it like, the ultimate superpower.
Like a comic book thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today on this deep dive, we're going to explore why getting that exact wish might actually be the heaviest, just most isolating burden you could ever carry.
It really forces you to confront a huge paradox, I think.
Mm.
Because, we spend so much time and energy trying to find certainty in a world that is just totally uncertain.
Oh, for sure.
But when someone actually gains that ability to, peek behind the curtain, what they see completely shatters their relationship with free will.
And that right there is the core mission of today's deep dive. We've got this truly fascinating source material, a video transcript from an individual named Osman, and he's an advanced yoga and meditation teacher, plus a master-level energy healer who actually specializes in critical care.
Which is a really unique combination of skills.
It is. And the transcript delves into his whole perspective on clairvoyance. And I want to be super clear here. We are not talking about, like, crystal balls or neon signs in the storefront.
Yeah, no tarot cards here.
Right. He approaches this purely as a physiological and, spiritual side effect of advanced yogic science.
Which I think requires us to make a really clear distinction right away, because Osman actually has a lot of respect for professional clairvoyance.
Yeah, people who make it their actual career.
Exactly. People who dedicate their lives to that path, they learn the rules, they set up a practice. But he clarifies that in advanced esoteric yoga, clairvoyance is never, ever the actual goal.
It's just a byproduct, right?
Completely. It just happens by default when a practitioner hits a specific threshold of nervous system regulation and energetic flow.
Which people usually call opening the third eye.
Right, the opening of the third eye.
And I kind of want to pause on that term, third eye, because, you hear it thrown around so casually in wellness spaces.
Oh, absolutely, like on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah. So what does that actually mean, mechanically speaking, in this yogic context?
All right.
Because Osman describes it as something that, once it's open, you just look at a person and instantly download their entire past and future.
So to get the mechanics of it, you have to look at how advanced yoga actually views the human body. Because it's not just about, physical stretching.
Right. It's way deeper than the poses.
Yeah, it's this incredibly complex mapping of the subtle nervous system. So the tradition says we have these energetic pathways, or nadis, running all through us, intersecting at these hubs called chakras.
Okay.
And the third eye, the Ajna chakra, is right in the center of the forehead, linked to the pineal gland. So in this framework, it's basically a high-level processing center for intuition that goes way beyond physical senses.
Okay, so it sounds like downloading a meditation app just to relax, and you accidentally get root access to the universe's source code.
That is the perfect way to put it, honestly. You bypass the normal user interface of reality completely.
But wait, Osman makes a really compelling point about what you actually see when you get that access. Because, sure, knowing someone's past makes you look like a cool mystic at a dinner party.
Right, a neat parlor trick.
Yeah, but seeing their future, like specifically seeing that they're going to suffer an unavoidable tragedy, that is a totally different, way heavier reality.
Because the future is where the actual gravity of this side effect really hits you. Osman explains that as you just walk around in society, you're inevitably going to cross paths with people who are on the edge of disaster.
Just everyday people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might look at someone at the grocery store and just perceive that they're going to die, like, very soon.
Which is terrifying.
It is. And the heaviest part, the thing Osman hammers home the most in the transcript, is his absolute conviction that you cannot stop it.
Which, let's unpack that, because that feels like a massive contradiction to spiritual practice. If you're a yogi seeking peace and trying to end suffering, isn't suddenly seeing everyone's tragic destiny the exact opposite of peaceful?
You would think so, yeah.
Like, how does a person even function carrying that kind of weight?
Well, according to his philosophy, it acts as the ultimate test, really. It totally strips away the illusion of control.
And forces you to just accept it.
Exactly. It forces you to confront the unchangeable nature of fate. And through his own life, Osman arrived at this unwavering conclusion. When it's your time, you die at your predetermined time.
No exceptions.
Right. Now, he does acknowledge this is a hugely debated philosophical topic, right? And he holds space for people who disagree. But for him, the tragedy you see is structurally written into the timeline.
And I think it's crucial for the listener to know that he didn't just, sit in a quiet room and philosophize his way to this conclusion.
Oh, no, not at all.
His conviction about fate was forged in a super visceral, frankly terrifying way when he was just 19 years old.
Well, yeah, his origin story for this belief is intensely practical, and it totally explains the psychology behind his worldview today.
Okay, so let's get into the crash, because this blew my mind. According to the transcript, he's 19, hanging out with friends, they've been drinking. And Osman actually owned the pickup truck they were in, but because he was a new driver, he tossed the keys to a friend who had more experience.
Which is a seemingly small choice that changes everything.
Exactly. So they're driving on this mountainous road at around 120 kilometers an hour.
Which is, what, like 75 miles an hour?
Yeah, roughly 75 miles an hour. And suddenly they hit this sharp hairpin turn that they just hadn't seen coming.
And at that speed on a mountain road, physics just takes over. There's zero room for error, the centrifugal force is too much, and the driver completely loses control.
The truck just slides right off the tarmac,
heading straight for a sheer drop off the side of the mountain.
And this detail really stood out to me. As the truck is going over the edge facing certain death, basically Osman says he didn't scream.
Didn't even flinch.
No. He doesn't brace for impact. He just goes completely silent. In that fraction of a second, at 19, he just accepts his fate and prepares his mind to die.
Which is wild because the psychology of that is so rare. The human animal is hardwired to panic and survive.
Right, for flight.
Exactly. For a 19-year-old to just bypass the sympathetic nervous system's panic response and surrender, that shows a really profound, innate detachment.
But then environment intervenes. Because right as the truck is tipping over, it slams into a giant boulder.
Thank goodness.
Right. The rock is big enough to absorb all that catastrophic energy and stops him from going off the cliff. But honestly, a crash like that should still be fatal.
Oh, the sheer violence of that sudden... You can see it in what happened to the other guys in the truck.
Yeah, it was an older truck, single bench seat. The driver had his arm out the window while they were sliding, and he got severe third-degree friction burns.
Stripped the skin right off his hand.
Yeah. And the guy in the middle was thrown forward into the steering column, cracked his ribs, and Osman was on the far passenger side.
Right, where the impact happened.
Yeah, he gets thrown forward, and his forehead smashes directly into the dashboard.
I mean, in a vehicle with no modern airbags, at that speed, you're expecting traumatic brain injury or like a snapped cervical spine.
Minimum.
Yeah.
But when emergency responders pried them out of this crushed metal cabin, Osman just walked away.
Unbelievable.
The medical exams, the x-rays, 0 injuries. No concussion, no fractures, not even a cut on his head.
Wow.
And sitting on the side of that mountain looking at the wreck, his whole worldview just locked into place. He internalized the absolute belief that he survived simply because his time hadn't arrived yet.
Which, brings up a really tricky behavioral question.
Right.
Because if you deeply believe your expiration date is set in stone, what stops you from just becoming totally reckless?
Right. Like, here's where it gets a bit concerning. If he truly believes the universe guarantees he'll live until a certain date, why not just jump out of a plane without a parachute to prove it?
Exactly.
Doesn't fate just give you a free pass to do crazy things?
That is the most logical pushback to this kind of fatalism. And Osman actually addresses this in the source material. He admits that when he was younger, he did test those boundaries a bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he talks about driving high-performance cars at insane speeds, like over 250 kilometers an hour.
That is terrifying.
Yeah, having near misses with debris on the highway, and he always walked away fine. But he draws a very hard ethical line.
Okay, what's the line?
He says fate is not an excuse for recklessness, mostly because of collateral damage. He realizes his actions could have killed innocent people whose time had not come.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
And he also makes a huge exception for suicide. He views that as the one unnatural way to alter the timeline. It's a disruption of the natural order, not a fulfillment of it.
That's a really important caveat. But outside of that, his conviction is totally solid.
Oh, absolutely.
He literally says if it's your time, you can be locked in a bunker and you'll still die.
Yeah.
But if it isn't, you can walk through a battlefield and not get a scratch.
And what that belief gave him wasn't an excuse to be a thrill seeker. It gave him this incredible psychological armor.
Right, because if you don't fear death, all that everyday anxiety just vanishes.
It just evaporates.
And he ended up putting that exact psychological armor to a huge test in his daily life. So, years after the mountain crash, Osman is working in sales in South Africa.
During a time of really intense civil unrest.
Yes, extremely dangerous. He had to cover these violence-ridden townships where, honestly, life was considered cheap. It was so bad that the actual military would park their armored vehicles outside the borders and refuse to go in.
Which tells you everything. You have heavily armed, combat-trained soldiers looking at the math and saying, nope, too dangerous.
Because there's open, automatic gunfire in the streets.
Right.
And into this environment drives Osman, unarmed. At first, he was broke, driving this tiny beat-up car right past the military blockades to sell photocopiers to schools inside.
Since nobody else would go in, he had a total monopoly.
Exactly. He figured he'd rather die trying to feed his family than sit at home doing nothing.
But as he got more successful, the stakes got way higher.
Oh, massively. He moves into high-end real estate, starts driving these incredibly flashy, expensive cars straight into these same war zones.
Which makes him a massive target.
Prime target for a carjacking. Like, statistically, a hijacking at gunpoint was almost guaranteed. But he never carried a gun, never even carried a knife.
Just his briefcase.
Just a briefcase.
Yeah.
It's like he was walking through a video game level with God mode turned on.
Yeah.
But, and this is what I want to ask you, how does an internal belief actually stop a physical bullet?
So this is where you have to look at the psychology of violence. In those predatory environments, attacks usually follow a very specific script.
Okay, what do you mean?
Assailants are looking for fear. They rely on the target, showing physiological panic, sweating, erratic movements, the whole fight-or-flight response.
Like prey.
Exactly. But when Osman drove in, his absolute conviction in his predetermined fate meant he had zero fear. He simply wasn't giving off any of those victim signals.
So his total lack of fear actually broke the behavioral loop of the people trying to attack him.
Precisely. By just being completely calm, he introduced this anomaly into the attacker's script. For Osman, he didn't see it as getting lucky.
He was proof.
It was the ultimate empirical test of his spiritual knowledge. His internal calm quite literally changed the external reality of those violent streets.
That is just a staggering way to apply philosophy to the real world. But, it leads us right into this massive external dilemma.
The ethical side of things.
Yeah. Being fearless about your own life is one thing. But when you have your third eye open and you see a grim fate coming for someone else, what do you do?
This is where the source material pivots hard. It goes from physical survival to this immense, just crushing psychological burden.
Because Osman gives some very stern warnings about blurting out what you see.
Very stern. He warns heavily against the urge to share these mystical insights.
But how do you handle the guilt? I mean, if you see, metaphorically, like a piano about to fall on a coworker's head, how do you just smile and say, have a great weekend?
It requires a level of emotional discipline most of us can't even fathom. Osman argues that if you volunteer that information to someone who doesn't understand these esoteric sciences, you just cause massive disruption.
Right, because if the tragedy is unchangeable, warning them doesn't help.
Exactly. And human psychology being what it is, if you warn them and the tragedy still happens, they aren't going to thank you for the heads up.
Oh, definitely not. The transcript mentions they'll look for a scapegoat. They might accuse you of being a wizard or say you cursed them.
Right. You try to be a good friend, and their grief just turns you into the villain.
But it gets even darker than just losing friends. Osman highlights a really pragmatic, frankly terrifying sociological risk of talking about this stuff at work.
This was the most chilling part of his perspective for me.
Yeah. He explicitly warns that if you casually tell business partners or colleagues that you hear voices or see the future, you are literally handing them the ammunition to destroy your life.
You have to think about how society is structured, right? Society runs on a very specific baseline of agreed-upon reality.
And if you step outside that,
you're immediately categorized as a pathology. Osman is very blunt here. Claiming to see the future gives people legally defensible grounds to institutionalize you.
Because clinically, it just sounds like schizophrenia.
Exactly. Or a severe psychotic break.
Which means if you have a malicious business competitor who wants your company, you've just handed them the playbook. They can have you declared mentally unfit and committed to an asylum.
It's a legally sanctioned weapon. And that's why Osman says the real test of an advanced yogi isn't having the psychic power. The power is just the TV turning on.
Right.
The actual mastery is the extreme intelligence required to keep your mouth shut. As your perception expands, your social adaptability has to expand at the exact same rate.
Knowing that the truth will just cause you harm.
Exactly.
And that totally reframes the whole enlightened mystic trope. It's not about living on a mountain. It's about operating covertly inside the rules of society.
Operating under the radar.
Yeah. And because he respects those societal rules, Osman's approach to his gifts is surprisingly grounded. He doesn't reject the modern world at all.
No, he places a massive premium on accredited education and, like, established science, which seems kind of counterintuitive for a mystic.
It does. Like, as an energy healer who works with terminally ill patients, you'd almost expect him to reject modern medicine. You know, that stereotype of the alternative healer who claims they have the one true
Oh,
cure?
the internet is full of them.
Right. But Osman is adamant that his patients have to get qualified, licensed medical treatment first. He sees his energy work as purely complementary.
And when you look at how he explains the healing, it's really rooted in human biology. He's not claiming to, magically dissolve tumors with his hands.
Wait, really? How does he explain the mechanism then?
He frames it completely around the endocrine and nervous systems. So when someone gets the terminal diagnosis, their body gets locked in a state of chronic fight-or-flight stress.
Which spikes their cortisol.
Right. And high cortisol suppresses the immune system. So his energy work basically induces a profound calming effect that drops that cortisol, shifting them into the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest mode.
Ah, so it gives their own immune system a fighting chance.
Exactly. He actually says 80% of the recovery is just the patient's own biological resilience and their desire to live.
I find this so delightfully paradoxical. You have a guy who survives a mountain crash by fate, walks through war zones with God mode on, sees the unchangeable future, and his approach to disease is totally physiological.
And he's constantly seeking out conventional education, too.
Yes, the transcript mentions he was looking into a yoga science certification through Harvard University.
Which is wild.
And he's taking internationally accredited courses on crystals because he felt his knowledge there was quote-unquote weak. Doesn't checking a Harvard syllabus feel a bit mundane for a master mystic?
I think it's the ultimate sign of humility, honestly. Osman realizes that subjective mystical experiences don't replace the need for scientific rigor or, ethical boundaries.
You're never done being a student.
Exactly. And no matter how enlightened you get, the ego has to stay in check.
That is just a brilliant synthesis. Let's take a second to recap the whole arc we've covered today.
Yeah, it's been a journey.
Truly. We started by dismantling that Hollywood idea of clairvoyance, seeing it instead as a heavy physiological byproduct of the third eye.
Then we looked at how seeing that unchangeable future solidified his belief in predetermined fate tested in a crashed truck and South African townships.
And from there, we got into the insane ethical and sociological burden of keeping it a secret, avoiding the asylum, and ultimately grounding all this esoteric power in real-world science and accredited education.
It completely strips away the romanticism of having superpowers, doesn't it?
Totally. It replaces it with this profound study in human restraint.
And I think the biggest takeaway for the listener is that true wisdom isn't just about what you know or what you can perceive. It's about the intense discipline of how and when you apply that knowledge in the real world.
Having the emotional intelligence to carry the universe's source code in total silence.
Exactly.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over today. We all crave certainty in life, right? We're desperate to know what tomorrow holds.
Always.
But if someone handed you a switch right now, and flipping it would instantly reveal the absolute unchangeable future of everyone you love, knowing you couldn't fix the bad parts, and knowing that speaking the truth could literally cost you your freedom and sanity, would you actually be brave enough to turn it on? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the boundaries of the world around you, and we'll see you next time.